to be the coaching video for those that are leading, teaching, facilitating an on-campus group that is going to meet on Sunday, September the 20th. So if you are one of those and you are leading, teaching, facilitating on that day, you got the right video. Hey, last week we obviously had to push back the start of our new series out of the book of Judges that we're calling According to Me. Because of Brett being ill on Sunday. But we're getting ready to kick it off this Sunday. We're excited about it, and we think it's going to be a fantastic study together for us, and also a challenge for us in understanding some things about God. But more importantly, the focus is going to be throughout this series is thinking about what is truth, and then how does that truth lived out in my life. And last week, you actually got to kind of get started with that, with the small group lesson that we had planned to that would fit that first message. But with the change we had to make for Sunday, we've also realized that we're going to need to do something similar to that for you this Sunday. So what we've done is we've got another lesson that we're going to have for you, and most of you probably have already received that via email. I'm going to have that for you which will fit as well with that message that we're going to be presenting Sunday. So Brett will be back Sunday. He'll be kicking off that series, and you'll be using a lesson that will obviously be a complement to that in your own campus small group. So let's get the lesson in front of you. If you haven't already done that, go ahead and get the manuscript printed out. Have that in front of you there. Grab your Bible, something to write with. And I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of overview and a couple of things maybe to help you as you go through that. Now, remember, these lessons are always designed to help you to give you a resource in leading, teaching, facilitating your group. So there's three things I want to remind you about in that. Number one, adapt this lesson to your group. Not every group is the same, and not every particular method or a particular way of teaching, presenting the material works for each group. So you know your group well. So adapt this lesson to your group. Number two, when you see those things in the lesson that say ask or say, understand that those are there for your help. We're not saying that you should have to verbatim ask that question. You can obviously choose to do that. Or we're not saying you have to verbatim say these statements. Make them your own. And that is kind of leads my third point. Make this lesson your own. We want to encourage you to do some personal study and personal prep outside of just the manuscript that you get. Use those Bible study tools that that you have to help you prepare for this lesson, and know that you there are certain parts of this lesson that you may decide that you want to go a little bit more maybe in depth in that area than this lesson did. Fantastic. So just use this, make it your own. Know that those things that we give to you, the ask and say, are there for your help. You may want to reword that. You may not even want to use it at all. And then thirdly, make this lesson your own. Okay? All right, let's get into it. What we're going to do is be looking at Hebrews chapter 11 in this lesson. Now, most of the time people think, well, the Hebrews chapter 11, isn't that what's oftentimes referred to as the hall of faith? And what has faith got to do with what we're going to be talking about out of the book of Judges? Here's what it's got to do with. It's going to have to do with the fact that what we're going to be talking about is truth. And because unless we understand what is true and where our truth comes from, then we're going to be, if we don't have those two things nailed down, we're going to be lost, literally lost. Okay, so spiritually lost. We're going to be lost in this world. So the questions that we're going to be looking at in this lesson are going to be, how do we determine truth? Because the source of our truth will oftentimes and will determine how we live. Now, that opening illustration is a really cool one to use, and probably some of you remember that. It created quite a buzz on social media, and even in other media areas of media is there at the time that came out. So maybe something good to throw up there. If not, you can use something off of the same type of thing there, maybe to help orient your group to what we're talking about, which is coming to grips with the fact that truth has to have a valid source for it to be truth. And just because I believe something to be true doesn't make it necessarily true. And that's kind of the whole point of that introduction. Now we get into the text in Hebrews 11. You're going to be working your way through, not the whole chapter, but you're going to be working your way through the first 4 or 5 verses, and then you're going to be dropping down to certain other sections there in there. I'm not going to work my way through the text, teaching the text with you this morning, but I do want to just throw out a couple of things for you to keep in mind, because we're talking about the connection between faith and truth. And don't be misled. There is a vital connection between your faith and truth, because your faith is only going to be as good as what you've placed your faith in. And if your faith is not placed in that which is true, then your faith is not going to be valid, no matter how much you have, no matter how hard you work at it. So those two things are inexplicably linked together. Bible faith is a confident obedience to God's truth in spite of circumstances and consequences. I want you to listen to that. Bible faith is a confident obedience to God's truth in spite of circumstances and consequences. In other words, we have to know what is true if we're going to be able to have faith that is confident to move forward even in the circumstances and consequences that are always not good. And so truth is very core to faith. And truth is based in God's character, who he is, and God's promises, what he said. And so that's what we're going to be wrestling with and thinking through as we go through this lesson and through this particular chapter here. Notice on page 3 that middle question, and I think this could be a very key thing for you as you work your way through preparing and also in teaching this material to your particular group. The question is, how can I know what I believe is commendable and true? That is really, as it says there, the $1 million question. Can I know what I believe is commendable and true? And that's going to be a question for you to wrestle with your group, because there are a lot of different sources of truth, so to speak. And so we have to decide really what is going to be our source of truth. That's why I say that God and truth are inexplicably linked there. Because if you don't have a legitimate source of truth, then your faith is going to be of no consequence there. On page 4, that first point kind of goes along what I've just mentioned there. That math illustration is a great illustration. Can you kind of work around that as you teach through the whole lesson? On page 5, we get to the back to that point that I mentioned earlier about where in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 36 through 39, it talks about those that believed God and believed his truth, yet they didn't get to see they never got to experience the result of their faith during the time that they lived here on earth. And that goes back to the who and the what. Our faith is linked to the truth, to God's truth, based on who he is, his character. And then because of who he is, we know we can trust what he says. And so those two things are tied back together there. Truth, obviously, is not always easy. It's not always, it sometimes can be, instead of making life easy for us, when we hold to truth, it sometimes things can be difficult because we live in a world that is a fallen world. And because it is a fallen world, there is a sense of, there's an environment where truth is not always, God's truth is not always the operative principle there. So look down at the bottom of page 5. That's very important there. Those two statements there, I think, are good, strong statements for you to think through with your group and to use in helping your group work their way through this lesson there. And following that, then we have the opportunity for you to break into your group into either small clusters where you can use the application moment that we provided for you there. Page 6 speaks about that, and then the application moment itself is given there to you on page Sorry about that. Page 8, okay? And that's where you can put in those clusters or small groups there within your own group to kind of think through there. Again, remember, it's really important that we don't overlook this step, because this is where a lot of times the things we've just learned, the truths, so to speak, we have an opportunity then to begin to put faith in them in our small group clusters and see how they get lived out in our lives there. So sometimes your whole group may be their small group cluster. It's just how that works for you. Okay? Well, have a great time studying together. Have a great time preparing. And I think you're going to find that this series out of the book of Judges is not only going to be insightful, but it's going to be personally challenging for us as well, as we all seek together to become, to be disciples, to grow in our relationship with God, and to continue to grow in our relationship with God as we work together as disciples here at Dayspring and work in the process of becoming a disciple, as we not only grow in our relationship with God, but that we're learning how to leverage what God has given us for the kingdom. And then we also provide an environment for us to be encouraged in making the story of Jesus in my life known to the world in which God has placed me. In other words, being a part of making, of helping every man, woman, and child have repeated opportunities to hear and see the gospel. So glad you're a part of that. Thanks for what you're doing by leading, teaching, facilitating this small group on a Sunday morning. And have a great time together.
Nothing will change if all the plans I make go wrong. Your love stays the same. Your light will guide me through it all. I'm hanging on. I'm leaning